This is KGW News at noon.
And we start this noon with the city of Portland getting more aggressive, clearing out homeless camps. Hello, everyone. I'm Brenda Braxton. The pandemic largely stopped the sweeps last spring, and neighbors and business owners are frustrated that the camps continue to spread. Before COVID, the city cleared about 50 campsites a week. Once the pandemic hit, that number dropped to about 5. Beginning Monday, the city says it'll start clearing out more camps. We talked with people who work for the Street Roots newspaper. It hires folks who are homeless or used to be. They told us the renewed sweeps don't address the deeper problem.
But whenever our city then does this kind of reactive policy, and I would say that's what this is, that really is about making things harder and putting the responsibility on the backs of the poor when it's a systemic issue, I feel very discouraged.
The city says it'll offer outreach programs, hygiene, access, and other services for homeless campers. Certain types of camps will also be prioritized. Those that are fire hazards, have reports of criminal activity, or block sidewalks will be more likely to be cleared first. Now to Oregon's efforts to vaccinate against COVID. As of today, half of the people who live here have received at least one dose. But the numbers show not all counties are vaccinated equally. In eastern Oregon, Umatilla and Malheur have some of the lowest vaccination rates in the state. Both are at about 26%, and vaccine supply exceeds demand. Small incentives don't sway the most hesitant residents. And local distrust of government is also a very big factor.
It doesn't help our case a lot. You know, when the messenger coming to you is somebody you're already a little bit skeptical of.
We have to be really intentional and not judgmental, a really empathetic response to people who have a lot of fears still about the vaccine.
That means meeting people where they are and hosting regular community clinics or mobile vaccination events. Umatilla County is also working with community leaders who've already been vaccinated to encourage others to get the shot. Okay, for the first time in more than a year, Oregon high school athletes are able to compete outdoors without wearing a mask. That's the updated guidance from the Oregon School Activities Association. When it comes to indoor sports, athletes and fans can also ditch their masks if they can prove that they've been fully vaccinated. Whether the event is indoors or outdoors, social distancing rules still apply. And school districts individually can require masks if they want to.
It'll feel weird since we've all been wearing masks around each other, but it'll feel more natural and we'll be able to breathe easier.
Fully vaccinated means someone has received all necessary doses of a vaccine, and at least 2 weeks have passed since they got their final dose. Okay, let's talk weather for a minute this afternoon. Rod, it's chilly and wet out there.
Yeah, I was taking a little stroll outside and I cut it short. I mean, it's been in the upper 40s much of the morning, and many areas are only around 50 in Portland anyway right now. We seem to be caught in one of the main cloud flows from north to south, just skirting down I-5 and especially off to the east side. There's a big upper level low that's starting to move just off to our east. We're on the back side of that, and that's the reason for that cloud flow from north to south. So here's the radar. We talked about this on Sunrise this morning, that we didn't think there'd be a lot of rain at the coast, and most of the action today would be inland off to our east. And in fact, it's been east of I-5 where most of the rain has been falling. This has been steady for much of the morning. There's Sandy, Troutdale. I've been checking rain amounts, and I can't find many spots that say they have more than about a trace or 0.01, 0.02 100ths of an inch. So it's pretty light. In fact, the roadway just kind of barely wet. This is out in Powell, out in front of Gresham Subaru. Could not find a rain report of more than a trace for you folks out there. Over on the west side, it's dry, but still mostly cloudy, and only 52 degrees out in the Reserve Vineyards and Golf Club in Aloha. So Portland's at 53. I've lowered the high temperature from 63 to 59 or 60 this afternoon. Now, Brenda, I do want to point out with this cooler weather, that pretty much stifles the chance of any stormy weather. So I pulled that out of the forecast, and that's some good news. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Well, thanks to dozens of tips from the public, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office has identified all but one suspect in this assault at Glen Auto Park last weekend, but they still need help identifying that guy. He was wearing a gray shirt with the number 4 on the front and on the back. He had on dark jeans, a gray hat, and a necklace. He's seen kicking one of 2 brothers while they were down on the ground. If you recognize this person, you're asked to call the sheriff's tip line at the number on your screen. We're learning more about the shooting Monday that injured 4 people. Police can now confirm it is related to ongoing gang violence. A sergeant says about 60 people were at the McDonald's on Swan Island after a funeral for a shooting victim. He said at least 1 rival gang member shot at the group and some people in the group fired back. 4 victims showed up at Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center in North Portland. The crowd followed them and then fights broke out. Police say some people tried to force their way into the ER and the hospital had to go into lockdown. Dozens of officers from all over the city swarmed the hospital to calm things down.
They're out hunting, looking for more and more and more. And that is, and at vigils. I mean, funerals and vigils should be somewhat sacred, and people should be, allowed to grieve in peace and process that tragedy, and they're not. That is something that we didn't necessarily see in the past, although in the past we had uniform assets in place to work funerals.
The victims are expected to survive. As of right now, no arrests have been made. This year, Portland is on track to have the most homicides we've ever seen. Police say they can't keep up with it, so now they're working with the FBI. It's been a long year for restaurant workers, and for a Portland woman in the industry, it's also been a year marked by a fight for her life. Taylor Lum works at Petite Provence on Southeast Division. Last month, she was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma. Doctors removed a golf ball-sized tumor from her brain. She also has a mass on her lung, which doctors will treat with radiation. Taylor's co-workers are rallying around her and raising money to help with rent and other expenses while she's out of work. She says staying positive and learning to accept help from others have been 2 keys to dealing with everything.
That's honestly like the hardest part for me, is to let people help me. And it has been like the biggest part of this last month is people helping.
And keep moving forward. The only way out is through.
Hey, that's a good saying. It is so true. The last person you heard from there was Taylor's boss. His name is Jim Constantine. He set up a GoFundMe account to help Taylor, and we have a link to it in our story on KGW.com. Well, there are 3 new members on the Beaverton School Board. Voters chose 3 women of color during Tuesday's special election, making the board the district's most diverse ever. More than half of Beaverton students identify as people of color, and board members say representation matters.
When kids can find somebody who can understand where they're coming from, what their experience has been, it helps them to feel comfortable with their skin.
It's not about being a person of color or white. It's about what are we going to do for our community and what perspectives do we have at the table.
Of the 7 Beaverton School Board members, 3 are the women of color and an existing board member who identifies as Native American.